Your life, your rules. Unlocked with Huawei Mate 7's advanced fingerprint security on a 6-inch display. Huawei Mate 7. Huawei.
The cost. Formula One has been around for more than 6 decades, and in those days cars just had an engine. They used to go around a track and they used to modify the shape of the body every so often, and every season the engines got faster. But since technology came into the game, that's when the true differentiation was introduced. And today they use technology for all sorts of methods: big data, analytics. They're analyzing everything as the car's moving, including the driver. And we're very privileged to have in Johannesburg with us the IT director for the Williams Formula One team, Graeme Smith. Welcome, Graeme. I'm not going to say welcome to South Africa because you're a Durban boy.
That's right. And it's good to be back.
Well, you've been in Formula One for a long time, eh?
I came into Formula One in 1997 when the data that we generated from a car fitted on a floppy disk. And these days, over a race weekend, we're generating up to 120 gig of data. So
120 gig of data.
Huge change.
So I mean, you've been with Renault, you've been with the Lotus team, and you're currently now with the Williams team. And you don't think of a Formula One team having an IT department.
So IT now touches every part of the car. Aerodynamics, we have a compute capacity in aerodynamics now, manufacturing, design, and the race engineering is obviously the part where we're taking that real-time data that's coming from the car, from other sources, bringing it together to make our strategy to try and beat the other guys.
And that's essentially the differentiator. That's what's going to set any team apart, is how you analyze the data and what best use you make of the data to improve the car's performance ultimately.
Absolutely. On the race weekend, it's the biggest differentiator. Getting access to that data in real time, being able to make decisions within one lap. It's pretty complex because of the number of data sources. You know, the data that we generate is not huge, but the number of data sources that we're trying to bring together, over 1,000 channels that we're capturing from the car, from our own cars, really makes it a complex problem, but something that the engineers love, and we work really hard on that.
Graeme, you talk about all the different data sources. I'm trying to imagine in a typical car. I mean, the sensors have become so small today. How many different sources of data do you have coming from the car? You mentioned 1,000.
1,000 channels with 200 sensors. So the car has about 200 sensors on it.
So the sensors would be in the brakes, they would be all over the car. Do the drivers actually have sensors in them as well? Are you monitoring their heart rate?
Yeah, so sometimes we'll do heart rate, but it's probably an area that we can look to grow into in the future in terms of driver performance. The car is so well instrumented now that an area of potential development in the future is around the driver and how we can help the driver to be better.
So the data that you're getting, is it indicating wear and tear, it's indicating what every single part is moving, what it's doing in the car, and what do you do with the data? Because are you analyzing it? You're obviously analyzing it real time,
yes.
But what do you do with the data afterwards? Because you did mention that it's used to improve the speed and the aerodynamics as well, because that's an integral part of Formula One.
Absolutely. So I suppose we use the data in 3 main ways. The real time, right now in this race, how can we beat the people that are ahead of us, and how can we make sure the people behind us don't overtake us? Then we'll be looking at how can we improve the car over the next couple of races, so learning what we can learn from this particular race. And then we have the longer term, maybe next season's car or towards the end of the season. We're already working on the 2016 car right now, and a lot of the data that we're generating at the track is helping to form what that car will look like.
I'm trying to think of these tiny sensors and how they've evolved. I mean, every year, everything, something new is coming out. But essentially, the sensors talk to some main processor. And I'm thinking now, if you can just explain to us how the integral part and how they talk to each other, because a car that's moving at over 300 kilometers an hour, how on earth is that getting the data to the Wi-Fi network, and however you get it across? And how are you reading that at the central point in the pits?
So in Formula One, all the cars have a standard electronic control unit. So the ECU is provided by one company to all the teams. And so we can't make changes to the ECU itself. But we can set where we put our own sensors. So all the teams can pick and choose what they monitor, and the sampling frequency. So some things we'll want to sample multiple times per second. Others, so track temperature, you may only want to look at every 2 seconds. And so there's that sampling rate as well, because of the amount of data you generate. When you go for a really fine sample rate, you generate much more data. And we capture the data in 2 ways as the car's going around. So real time, which is less of the channels, and then as it comes past the pits, we take a burst of data from it. And that's where the rest of the data is then filled in.
You must have a grapple on what's happening technologically. I mean, there's this massive revolution with artificial intelligence and robotics. Is it far out to think of Formula One in the future being driven by robots in the same way that we have automated self-driving cars? Is that something that you're looking at in the future?
I hope not, because I think most Formula One fans have a driver that they love to follow.
Yes.
The drivers are these incredibly complex characters who drive these amazing vehicles, and fans follow drivers. I think the technology is already available that we could do driverless Formula One cars. But I hope we don't.
So where do you see it in the next 5 years? I mean, the sensors are becoming very much more sophisticated. The technology is becoming smaller. Where do you see technology going in Formula One in the next 5 years?
So we're looking at robotics. We're looking at beyond just the car itself. We're looking at the manufacturing process, how we can manufacture parts much quicker. A lot of the car, 80% of the car is made of carbon fiber, which is still a very slow process, a very manual process to create carbon fiber. So 3D printing, we already use for some parts of the full-size Formula One car, but I think there'll be more growth in that as the materials become stronger. And robotics is definitely something that we're looking at, and wearable technology within IT to help us with the pit crew, with the drivers. There's things that we can do there in terms of making pit stops even quicker. We have an ambition to get under 2 seconds and as close to 1 second as we can for pit stops, which feels a million miles away because we're at 3 seconds now, which is already incredibly quick.
3 seconds?
3 seconds, 3 to 3.5 seconds to do the pit stops. We want to get that down to under 2 seconds and as close to a second as we can.
That's absolutely insane. Now your partner in this whole technology is Avanade. I mean, they're really partnering a lot with the technology. Tell us about the association with the company.
So we started working with Avanade on the 5th of January this year. Already deployed our first applications to the track. The first application that we worked on with them was around tyre optimization, making sure that we get the best out of the tyres. There are 4 main performance factors in a Formula One car: the driver, the engine, the tyres and aerodynamics. We've got a fantastic aerodynamics department that are turning out performance improvements race by race. In our drivers, we think we've got as good a driver as any other team. We all use the Pirelli tyres, so it's optimizing how you use those tyres. And in the Mercedes engine, we think we've got the best engine that's on the grid. So we're really focused now on how do we get more out of the tyres than some of the other teams are. How can we get more laps? The tyres are deliberately factored to be not lasting. You shouldn't be able to do a whole race on a set of tyres.
Yeah.
The tyres will fall off a cliff, the performance will disappear. So we want to map how we can get more out of the tyres, help the drivers to change their driving style so that they can do more with the tyres. So that data existed, but we weren't getting to it in real time.
Just out of interest, how many people do you have in your IT department at the Williams Formula One team?
So the company as a whole is 600 people working in Formula One and 20 of us in IT. So it's not a huge group.
Big enough, big enough. Hey, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for joining us, Graeme. We really appreciate it. Welcome back to South Africa. Nice to have a South African, one of our own boys involved in Formula One, and he's been doing it for many seasons already. But isn't it insane how much technology is being used in Formula One? They create 120 gigabytes of data per race. And Graeme says, well, it's not too much data. 120 gigabytes? Well, that's a lot of data. The optimization technology moving mainstream into Formula One.